So here's the project for the Imitation Game, and it's at 104 BPM throughout the entire project. Let's have a listen. So that's the brilliant piece by Alexandre Desplat, and let's get to it. So the interesting thing about the piece is that during the interview, Desplat said that he wanted the piano to sound like a machine, so it was actually sort of like sequence, but not, if I'm not mistaken, played by a real piano, but with that sequence feeling. So let's have a look at the MIDI. So it's really like quantized, and it's just a repeating pattern. Really straightforward thing, and in this case, it's under acoustic pianos, Steinway piano too. There's no real EQ on it. I just use it pretty raw. It's a little bit of reverb or send on bus one at 27 dB, and on bus one, the reverb is a fairly big reverb. It's a Hall 3-second long reverb, and it's 100% wet. And you can see this is just looped across. So if you don't know how to loop, basically if you put your pointer on your region, the top right of your region, it'll turn into this, and you can sort of drag it up or down or wherever you want to make loops. And later you can also convert those loops into real regions if you want. I've mapped it to Control L to convert it into a real region. And yeah, that's if you want to convert it into real regions. Now, there is another Steinway piano that comes in, and this one is sort of like a... And I've kept this one fairly dry because I didn't really want it to be washed out, everything to be washed out. So everything, the strings and the orchestra is already fairly washed out. So I kept this one quite dry, just for some definition. Now, the thing that doubles with the piano is a celesta, and it sounds like that. So it sounds kind of like bells, right, Celesta? Anyway, let's have a look. It's under orchestral keyboards Celesta. And I set it to the same bus, but a bit wetter. In this case, it's about -13. And it comes in and comes out. That's the interesting thing about this sound. So that's pretty interesting. It's got a bit of that machine clockwork kind of feeling going about it. And underneath that, I use another Steinway piano too, this time with no reverb at all. It's really dry. And it sounds like this. It's sort of like, goes together with everything. So one's going up and one's going down. Contra motion. And then you have your Celeste. It's really interesting movement about it, and it's repetitive but not boring. Now for the strings, there's this sort of bass going, and this bass line was under Factory Pop Strings EXS Strings 1. Now I use this because of the texture that it gives. I really like it, and there's a bit of automation if you open it up. Just a very little bit. Now this project could use a ton more automation to really bring out the orchestra, but I didn't go through everything. You can download the project and have a go and see if you can make it sound even more organic with a bit more movement in the volume. And at the start, there's also these EXS strings too, which is under pop strings. Now they sound like that. So, here we go. And something you notice about this is they're coming in a bit early. So I just copied this over, I octaved them, and then I nudged them left a little bit because the attack for this particular strings are a bit slow. So I decided to nudge them to the left a bit so that they would come in a bit earlier. You can see the differences. So yeah, I think that sometimes if your attack's a bit too slow on strings, you need to nudge it a little bit to let it start a little bit earlier. And this happens in this case. There's also automation coming in, so it sort of builds up like this. And that's the automation. Now there's also this French horns under orchestral brass, French horns legato, and they're playing these singular lines like this. Now you can see they're all playing the same sort of like melodic line. And that's kind of carrying the theme of the melody. It's interesting because these are all the low-end instruments or fairly mid-low instruments that are carrying it, and the rhythm is sort of being carried by the piano and the celeste, the sort of the higher instruments. So the French legato is playing those octave type things, and this is an interesting thing. If you have a sub, you can really enjoy what's going on here. If you don't, you might need to use headphones that have a low end response to really hear this. It's sort of a really low end monster sign, which is I think it's under thin bass, and it's under monster sign here. Yeah, that's right. And it's a really low pulsing bass. I use an ARP set to 1/8. It's under live and basically sounds like this. It's playing the same melody, but it's sort of pulsing. And that pulse sort of goes right round to, you know, up to the near the end of the song. And then on the second part, you have a flute. It's a flute solo legato, and it sounds pretty decent if the lines are long like this. As with horns and flutes, you always need to send it to a reverb, and in this case, I sent it to the same reverb. All of these I sent to the same reverb, which is once again, the long reverb in Space Designer on bus 1. And in this case, I didn't use other reverbs because when I was listening to the project, he obviously uses a real orchestra and recorded in the real room, and it sounds really organic. You can hear the room, you can hear all of them playing together, and it's really, really hard to recreate that in a sort of sample based form, and of course in using standard Logic Pro instruments, but I think we did pretty well here. Now moving on to the next section, there's this little triangle thing, sorry. And triangles you can find in orchestral kit under orchestral percussion, orchestral kit. Now let's find the MIDI for that. It's just this MIDI here. It says triangle, and it's just looping. That's it. Now the melody it's carried by EXS strings 1, which is under pop strings EXS string 1, sent to a bus as well. And here's where you get the main melody for the third part. Now it didn't sound sort of strong enough, so I paired it with a orchestral string ensemble. And you can hear it by itself like this. They're kind of very different tones, so if you combine them, they become this fatter, bigger thing. It's got a bit more of the airiness here and fatness here. And let's go check out the next thing underneath that. Is the violas, which is under orchestral strings, violas, legato, and they're playing these lines. So they kind of sound like that together. And the lower ends are playing this. So they're playing that melodic idea that began here, and now there's a sort of like a counter melody on top of that for the strings. Now this part, it changes in mood. Sort of like becomes a bit more of a love theme kind of feeling, that at least to me it does. And it's carried by English horn. And the English horn is under orchestral woodwinds English horn, legato, and it's got its reverb sent to bus 1. Here's how it sounds. So it's got this really nice sort of like texture about it. And what I did here was basically the only bit of automation in the section, which is sort of this up and down sort of rhythm, which is fairly common, and you get sort of like a breathing sort of feeling, like the strings are sort of breathing. So here's how it sounds. This is The strings are doubling the horn. So that's how it goes, and you still have your monster signs going on here, and then the low ends as well, which sound like these. So most of these are single lined, but this one have become like chords, triads. So you got your French horns supporting your English horns, haha. And yeah, so that's how it is. And then this new section here, it's got this curious sort of unfolding feeling about it. This song is amazing because it changes so much and so many levels, yet doesn't feel abrupt. So we have this pizzicato basses under orchestral strings, basses pizzicato, and this is the line. I didn't really send this to a reverb. You can if you want to. Yeah, I just kept it quite dry. And then there is the violas, which is another staccato line, and this is under orchestral strings, violas pizzicato. So they sort of complement each other. And then there are the flutes, and these are two of the same orchestral woodwinds flute solo plus, sent to the same bus, but they're playing different things. They harmonize with each other. So this one's going. So this is the top line, and this is sort of the harmony on the bottom. And I use two of the same instruments because I can mix them differently, and you can see the levels on these is much higher than the level on this. So when you put them together, really beautiful sounds, and it's still got that monster sign underneath, which I find really interesting because it's sort of like constantly gives off this ominous feeling in the background. And then it gets kind of like bigger again. There's a big thump underneath that. So that's an orchestral kit as well, under orchestral, percussion orchestral kit. And it's just this big thump of a note, which is kick drum. And this one's big, so I just gave it tons of reverb, and yeah, and it's got a big boom right there. And this string ensemble is basically playing all different parts, so I kind of mixed them up together. I'm not trying to be like ultra accurate with the orchestra here in the sense of getting each individual violin, viola, cello, contrabass part separately. You can if you want to, but in this case, and I feel when you sequence stuff in your computer that's going to stay in your computer, then just do what works. So in this case, this works, because if you break them up, it's going to be a tough time trying to mix all these string sections together. This one already feels glued together because it's on the same track with the same levels and same sense and everything. And if you automate that, and you still get, you know, it glued together as well. And considering that there's sort of like a synth monster sign happening right there, so we don't really have to care that much about realism. We just care about feeling. I think that's the most important thing. So you got your octaves going on here on two separate instruments. And then you have a new piano. And this one is pulled down because it's softer, but it's the same piano, Steinway piano too. And it sounds like this. I think it's quite lively, quite vivace, and it's, but right at the end, it sort of gets... It's just looping right until the last note. And the strings as well, they come in here. It's like this lowish rumble. This octave bass note. And then you have your sort of high strings. Playing the main melody and then sort of like fading out. Sort of, yeah, automating here. And the same for these two strings as well. So you can automate much more, like I said before. Yeah, you can play around with the project and do that. Right now, this is the extent that I've done it at. And you have your pizzicato with your staccato cellos. And cello staccato you can find under orchestral strings, cello staccato. There's this little pattern here as well. Going together with this. So there's some really interesting sort of like harmonies and rhythms over here. And then you have your basses actually sort of alternating with this boom in the orchestral kit. Which I kind of like. And then at the very last bit, there is a rotary vibraphone. So you go under keyboards, mallets, rotary vibraphone. It's got this jazzy James Bond vibe about it. And I EQ'd the top and really like just got rid of everything, because if not, it would be too bright. And I didn't like that. It lost a bit of that, that kind of like mysterious kind of vibe. So yeah, just the channel EQ. And then you have this octave ending. And let it die away. And that is the track.